What's up, everybody? We're here with another fantastic weekly webinar. Took some time off for the summer, and we're happy to be back. We have a very special class today regarding performing versus non-performing notes. I think notes are a very great and secure investment, and we'll get into it why. Disclaimer, Newview Trust serves as a custodian for alternative assets. We do not provide tax, legal, or investment advice, nor do we sell investments. But we try to provide you all the educational material that you can, so you, as the IRA owner, can invest your funds into what you know best. So what is a self-directed IRA? I'm sure all of us know. It's an IRA in which the IRA owner directs all investment activities, but there is no legal distinction between a self-directed IRA and an IRA. An IRA is an IRA. Today, let's go ahead and introduce Mr. Jerry Wallace. Thank you so much for being here. Please go ahead and give your introduction and share with us about performing versus non-performing notes. I'm very interested to learn everything that you have going on today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tabitha. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Jerry Wallace. I'm the managing member of FiveWB LLC. We're in Northern Kentucky near Cincinnati, Ohio, and we specialize in note investments. I'm going to be talking specifically, as you mentioned, about performing versus non-performing real estate notes. That's what our webinar is going to focus on today. Very hot topic these days. Notes are a very, very highly sought after investment class. One of the questions we get most often, the reason we're doing this topic today, is what is the difference, the trade-offs, the pros and the cons between performing and non-performing notes. So let's dive right into that. Need to let you know, sorry folks, another quick disclaimer. I'm not an attorney or a CPA, but I am very experienced in advising people on their note investments. So what this screen is really telling you is that everyone's situation will be different. Your own financial situation and risk tolerance must be factored in and considered before moving into the realm of note investing. So with that disclaimer, let's get started. Just a brief point or two about myself. As I mentioned, I'm the managing member of FiveWB. Started real estate investing in 2001, have a master's in public admin from NKU, 20 years in business management, got 5 awesome kids, and the proud founder of CCRM. So welcome to our webinar. Let's go ahead and get into these pros and cons of performing and non-performing investments. What we'll cover today: an introduction, a comparison of performing versus non-performing, talk a little bit about suitability, each individual investor's risk tolerance, and then final tips and takeaways. So what is real estate note investing? A real estate note is simply a promissory note that is secured by real estate, of course. We, FiveWB, purchase real estate notes to invest like a bank does so that we can collect the monthly payments and earn a good, well-secured return. That's what note investing is all about. Performing versus non-performing notes. How does each type of note work, and what are the pros and cons? Let's move right into this. Pros of performing notes: consistent cash flow, lower risk, and we'll talk about those trade-offs more, higher liquidity, easier to sell if you need to. Some of the cons, of course, are lower returns as compared to non-performing notes. You've got more competing buyers. Those all go together, right? Now let's look at the non-performing notes, pros and cons. Higher returns. You can definitely receive higher yields with non-performing notes. These are notes that are currently in default, right? These are notes that are going through the foreclosure process. Lower purchase price, get a lot better investment to value ratio. There is an opportunity for asset acquisition. If that's your goal, you could end up owning these properties. The cons, a little bit higher risk. You can't completely control the cash flow. It's uncertain, and there are potential legal challenges, namely foreclosure, right? We'll talk about how we mitigate that and work through those issues. Let's look at a performing note case study. The note details on this performing note case study are with $258,000 being the fair market value. The note on this actual project that we worked through was sold to us for $235,400. So let's just break that down for a minute. That means that there was just over a $47,000 discount at purchase. Very strong, bringing us to a 73% investment to value. Now, that's a lot of numbers very quickly. So let's talk about the analysis to tell you what this means in terms of investment value on this performing note. This note has had an 8.2% interest rate, and it was being offered at a significant discount that we just talked about, the $47,000 and change discount, which brought that rate, that yield, up to 10.94, almost 11% yield. Very strong for a performing note. And again, that put us at a 73% investment to value ratio. The purpose of this case study and the next is just to give you a quick comparison between what is typical for performing notes to provide versus non-performing. So let's look at the exit plan. Very important to know start with the end in mind. This is being held long-term to enjoy an above average yield with a well-secured real estate backed note with 346 months left on it. That's what we do with most of these performing notes. Hold them long-term, right? And you can see that this was quite a nice yield. Now let's flip over and take a look at a non-performing note case study. In the note details, we find that this fair market value is $165,000. That's what the property that is backing the note is currently worth, fair market value. There was a $140,250 mortgage note. That's the face of the note, or what it is currently what it is currently left to be paid on that note. That was sold to us for $74,322. Much better investment to value than the last. Why? Some very obvious reasons. This is a non-performing note. And again, I have to be very clear about this. Non-performing notes means these notes are currently in default or already in the foreclosure process. Very different investment from a performing note, right? So this resulted in almost a $66,000 discount at purchase. We started off at almost $66,000 ahead of the game in terms of raw profit. This was at a 45% investment to value. Very, very different type of investment, very different type of yield. That's the purpose of the talk today, is to explain that. The deal analysis is that this note had an 8.5% interest rate and a monthly payment of $1,277.51. Let's get into the numbers a little bit more. We had 213 months left on the mortgage. No payments have been made for 7 months. Again, that's the point of non-performing, not currently receiving any payments on this. There is a considerable amount more risk in this type of transaction. So let's talk about how we mitigate that risk, right? There are 3 possible outcomes from any non-performing note. They are loan modification, which happens to be about 50% of our annualized deal flow. C4K means cash for keys. You may or may not have heard of that, but that simply means that we're going to work with the borrower to help them when they are no longer able to overcome their financial obstacles to get moved out of that property and do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, sign the property over, right? That's roughly another 25% of our annualized deal flow. And then 25% is foreclosure on an annualized basis that we have to work through. We handle all of that, not our investor partners. So let's take a look more in depth at what each one of these 3 possible outcomes looks like. Loan modification, cash for keys, and potential foreclosure. Before I dive into this, let me just tell you, every note investment firm has a different philosophy and different goals, right? Quite frankly, our goals very simply are not to work toward property acquisition. We are trying to help borrowers stay in their property where possible and profitable for our investors, right? So what that means is, frankly, folks, I used to be involved in rehabbing a lot of properties and being a landlord. I moved out of that business and I now help rehab, if you will, borrowers. Primarily, we rehab those borrowers when they've had a financial mishap through loan modification. That's what this means. The loan modification on this non-performing note involved reinstatement and 6 months of payments That's a reinstatement amount of those missed payments plus 6 months of payments. This is all speaking to revenue resulted in $12,775. Now, what's the exit plan when this takes place? We sold the note at 12 months. In other words, held the note for 12 months for 85% of the face value, or $119,212. Now, if you remember in the previous slide, I said that we were purchasing at 45% of value, right? We turned around a year later and sold it at 85%. That answers the question, how do we profit and help investors profit with non-performing notes? We manage all of this, and I'll tell you more about our team that helps make this happen as we work through. So the purchase price of $74,332 minus the purchase price factored into that brings us to a $57,655 profit, a very healthy profit within 12 months of time. Now remember, the outcomes can be very different based on which exit plan we are moved into. Now, to be sure, we understand velocity of capital and the value therein. We're going to move as quickly as we possibly can in any of these options, but frankly, the borrower chooses, right? They choose to move forward with loan modification, or if they have a financial mishap they cannot overcome, we try to do both the correct business outcome, try to bring about the correct business outcome, and do it in a humane way through cash for keys. What that means is going to the borrower and saying, listen, we can all see that this is not going to work out. You've unfortunately experienced a life calamity that is causing you to no longer be able to make these payments. Let's get you the cash needed to help you move on to your next housing solution. That most generally results in us providing them with $5,000 or less to help them get moved out of the property. They sign the property over, we liquidate the property. It's that straightforward. As you see on the slide, we typically sell the property, the underlying asset, for around 90% of fair market value. Again, velocity is key for us and for investors. That fair market value being $148,500 less the $5,000 to the borrower that I mentioned, and $8,910 in this case for marketing. Got to pay the realtor, right? We use licensed realtors around the country to affect these outcomes. This could take between 6 months and a year, frankly. Exit plan number 2, where we do cash for keys. The last option, and let me go ahead and let you know, Tabitha, this is never our desired outcome. We don't want to see properties go through foreclosure or the borrowers have to go through that. So we do everything we can to avoid it. We're not a firm that wants to take ownership of the property unless it's necessary, but we have to in about 25% of our annualized deal flow. You'll notice, the numbers are very similar under the foreclosure option. It still costs us on average about $5,000 to affect that outcome. The difference, as you see, is that money's going to an attorney instead of going to the previous homeowner and borrower. We'd much rather help the person move out of the property if they just can't afford it any longer. Timeline-wise, folks, the big difference is this could take over a year if we have to go through the foreclosure. So this is why it was said in earlier slides that we can't control all of the legal complexities, and therefore there is more risk. Now, you can see the profits are potentially much higher with non-performing notes. But again, I encourage you, when we're deciding which note option works best for you, we've really got to have more conversations about this. And I'll be inviting you at the end of my presentation to do that, to continue this conversation. Performing notes offer lower risk and consistent cash flow, where non-performing notes provide higher potential returns, as we've seen, and asset acquisition opportunities. We do have some investors that desire that. So in my opinion, the best way to invest in real estate is through notes. You can enjoy above average return on investment while avoiding the very serious potential pitfalls that come with being a landlord or rehabbing properties. I know I've done quite a bit of this in the past, and I can tell you that not dealing with tenants, having no toilets or taxes to deal with respect to the properties themselves, note investors have property owners paying them monthly, which is a beautiful thing. Property owners pay their own property taxes, handle the property maintenance, and simply make a payment to us and our investors each month. It's a beautiful arrangement. Let me stop and just tell you as we wrap up about our team of professionals that help us affect these type of outcomes for our investors. Who handles all this for us? We've got professional loan servicing, insurance, title services, and legal advisement. that all help mitigate the risk of any of these three outcomes. So final tips and takeaways, and I'll turn it back over to Tabitha to wrap us up. The decision to invest in performing or non-performing notes depends on your own investment goals and risk tolerance. I invite you to continue our conversation about how note investing can work for you and whether either performing or non-performing notes would work better for you. Very simply put, the performing notes are much better for a person who is looking for a solid, more passive income. That's what most folks do with us through their self-directed IRA investments, but we do have folks that want to be more active, more aggressive, frankly, and we'll take more time to explain those options to you if that's your desire. Let's talk about how you can get in touch quickly, and I'll turn it back over to Tabitha. To continue the conversation, I invite you to call me directly in our offices here in Fort Thomas, Kentucky at 888-922-0788. I'll be glad to speak with you personally, make sure that we help you figure out the best option available to achieve your note investment goals. Feel free to email me, jerry@fivewb.com. You can go on that same website, FiveWB.com, book a call with me, discovery call, so that you can figure out more about this world of note investing, ask any question you'd like, and download our free note investing report. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through the differences, the pros and the cons of performing versus non-performing note investments. My name's Jerry Wallace with FiveWB. I have enjoyed presenting, and I do look forward to speaking with you. Thank you so much, Tabitha.
Oh, Jerry, we thoroughly enjoyed having you on the show. Amy, is there any questions from the audience that we can go ahead and ask and get some more insight?
Yeah, we had a couple come in. So the first question was, how do you negotiate the purchase price of a non-performing note?
Wow, great question. So let me tell you, first of all, where we buy these non-performing notes from, okay? It's no big secret. I'll be glad to reveal this to you. We purchase those primarily from both hedge funds and small to regional banks, okay? So we're working with asset managers. And I know when sometimes I tell people this on calls, and they're like, oh my gosh, he just gave away the keys to the kingdom, right? Let me tell you what, this business, like many others, is all about relationships. The access that we have with these asset managers is really the value that we bring along with our management team. So to answer your question, how do we negotiate? We go through all of the very, very important variables, such as, are the properties owner occupied? Are they not owner occupied? What status and level of default are they in, right? How far along are they? Has a bankruptcy been filed? Many, many, many other things that we use to grade and work through those negotiations with banks. But when it's all said and done, if the question is, how do we achieve the lowest purchase price and best investment to value ratio possible, let me just tell you the larger macro reason, and I'll tell you what we do to affect it. Banks, especially the smaller and regional banks, are in a very tight position, tough position with these non-performing notes. The Fed, forces them to dispose of these non-performing notes. And we as investors simply get to take advantage of that each quarter, is basically the way this business works. At the end of each business quarter, we're able to pick up some very nice opportunities to purchase these notes. So it's about timing is the answer to your question. Timing these offers at the right time. And naturally, as I mentioned, the relationships, right? We always close as promised, which is paramount in this business. Excuse me. So those two components, our business integrity and the timing involved, and of course, market analysis, are really how we achieve those very significantly discounted non-performing purchases.
Great. And then another question was, how has the market of non-performing notes changed in recent years?
Wow, great question. It is mostly driven, especially in the last 18 months, by, guess what? Interest rates. Yes, you guessed it.
Of course.
So my I have a family member. I'll leave out the name to protect the guilty, but I have a family member who is a bank president in a large national market. And I discuss this with him on a regular basis. The big impetus behind this is that interest rates are rising. And we all know that many banks issued thousands and thousands of loans or notes over the previous 7 to 8 year period at extremely low interest rates, right? So not only do these banks, primarily regional and small local banks, have huge pressure to sell because the Fed lessens the amount that they, or lowers the amount they will allow them to lend when they have bad debt. So they have that significant pressure, but they want to get even the performing notes moved on because it's an opportunity cost, right? It's very simple. I don't want to try to pretend that I'm the banker expert on here, because I'm not. That's the family member I talked about. But what I can tell you in very basic terms is that when we or a bank, anyone, has money loaned out at 3% and they have current opportunities to turn that around at 6, 7, 8%, anyone would like that trade, right? So they want to sell these notes off, get their money redistributed at current rates. And very simply, the answer is that it's market rate driven, like most everything in the note industry.
Gotcha. And one last question for you. How do loan modification agreements work in the context of non-performing notes?
That's a great question. So let me just back up one step and tell you that our process, as I mentioned earlier, is always built around the goal of keeping people in their property if at all possible. It's not always possible. As I mentioned, about a quarter of our annualized deal flow results in foreclosures. But to talk about how a loan mod actually happens, I'm just going to tell you the most common method. There are many variations of it. What we will do very simply, if we're engaged with a self-directed IRA investor as a JV partner with us, is that we will go in, evaluate the borrower first, and see if their financial calamity or difficulty is insurmountable, or have they largely overcome it. If they've largely overcome it, which it does end up being the case in the majority of these situations, we will come back and help them with, and again, this is not the only way to do a loan mod, but it's the most common. You need to understand that we're actually becoming the bank, right? When we purchase the note, as the lending entity, we're able to do a loan mod where we simply take the arrearages, or the amount that they're behind on the note, right, and restructure the note so that the arrearages simply go on the end of the debt or on the end of the note. That may sound confusing, but we can explain that to anyone interested. It is a very straightforward process. We have our attorneys take care of that, right? We negotiate, then we let the professional attorneys and CPAs get involved in structuring those agreements. Goes through a formal closing, much like you would have at a title company, to affect those. So simple answer, most of these end up taking the arrearages and put them in the form of a loan mod on the back of the note.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. We are so appreciative to have you on our class. And like he said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to follow up with him and get some more information or get any questions answered. As always, if you're interested in using your self-directed IRA here at New View Trust, please scan this QR code and give us a call. I'd love to hop on the call with you and, again, answer any questions that you have. Jerry, thank